Some health experts are warning that the overturning of Roe versus Wade will worsen maternal death rates. The U.S. already has the highest maternal mortality rate among developed nations, and Black women are 3 times more likely to die in pregnancy or childbirth than white women. The mortality crisis is especially hard in the state of Georgia,
Today's date,
where the racial disparities
June
in healthcare
24th,
are even worse, and maternal death rates are the 2nd highest in the United States. Joining me now is Stacey Abrams, the Democratic nominee for Georgia governor. We should also mention that we invited your opposite on from the Republican side of things, and he declined. I want to start with what we are seeing right now from the Supreme Court. There are people out in droves protesting the Roe versus Wade decision, but there are some also out celebrating it. I want to get your reaction on today's ruling and what it will mean for the women in your state, especially in your view, the women of color.
It's dangerous. It is appalling. I am angry, but I'm also committed. We know that Georgia has, our population is 33% African American. And as you pointed out, Black women face 3 times higher maternal mortality rate than their white counterparts. For Hispanic women, it's nearly the same. And we have 2 of the largest populations in the state. We also are ranked near the bottom in terms of access to healthcare. We are number 2 in the number of uninsured. We have a very broken healthcare system. We have refused to expand Medicaid. Our maternal mortality rates are extraordinary. We are number 6 in terms of infant mortality. And what all of this means is that we have a healthcare system that is not equipped to do the very job it should do. And now we're going to add additional pressure by not only denying women access to medical care, but we're also going to criminalize and prosecute doctors for providing that care. That is setting up a situation where Georgia becomes dangerous for women, and that is untenable.
That's a really strong statement that you're saying your state becomes, and as you put it, dangerous for women. I want to talk about a recent poll out of Georgia. It shows that 68% of Georgia voters oppose the Supreme Court's action today. 54% are also against the state's 6-week abortion ban, which is sure to be reinstated. Governor Kemp has vowed to go further. He said he wants to outdo other governors in passing the toughest anti-abortion laws. What does this mean for your political run? And do you, or any time in your life, did you think that abortion should be illegal?
And let's start with that part of the question. I was very much on the side of anti-abortion through much of my upbringing. I grew up in Mississippi in a very religious family, in a religious community, and I was raised to have a very uncritical eye to this question. Once I started really thinking about what it meant, and more importantly, when I had a friend who had to confront the very real consequences of an unwanted pregnancy, and I wasn't able to give any help to her, I had to reevaluate where I stood. I understand the sincere concerns, but those are religious concerns, or often concerns driven by personal morality, and that should be your choice. But abortion is a medical issue. It is about a medical decision, and there is no place in that medical decision for ideology or for politicians. And so the question of what we should do, politics is about how we make choices in a democracy. And in our country, and as of today, that choice has to be made by the governors in each of our states. The governor of Georgia has already said he does not care about women and their bodily autonomy. He does not care about their health, because he not only has already adopted and signed into law the most restrictive abortion law in Georgia's history, with the constrictions at 6 weeks, he has said in interviews that he also supports eliminating access for incest and rape. This is someone who cannot be trusted to simply stop at the water's edge. He is going to go further and further, and anyone who doubts it simply has to listen to his words. For women in Georgia, especially women of color in Georgia, Brian Kemp is dangerous. He does not intend to protect women or their bodies, and worse, he does not intend to provide them with the health care they need. He refuses to expand Medicaid, although we can afford it. He refuses to do what's right for the women of Georgia. This is the same man who claims to care about women and children, who was throwing away thousands of canisters of baby formula as recently as a month ago, because he does not care what happens after birth. He does not care about what happens to our communities. And I would dare anyone to look at his record and to look at his rhetoric and tell me how this is someone who should be in charge of the lives of women in the state of Georgia.
I do not speak for Governor Kemp, but I know that he would push back to say that he does very much care about women and families. You are saying, in your view, that when you look at some of the things that he has said and some of the legislation he's pushing forward, you completely disagree. I'd like to turn to another major issue brought up by the U.S. Supreme Court. Congress finally passed bipartisan gun reforms today, which you've called an important step. We also, though, have this ruling by the Supreme Court that basically says states can't really regulate, guns, especially when it comes to being able to just carry them around in the streets. What do you think are the challenges going forward in Georgia and the rest of the country?
And I think this goes to my earlier point, and I appreciate the even-handedness that you're taking. But let's be clear, I'm not speaking from rhetorical space. I'm speaking from the record that we have seen in Georgia. On the issue of gun violence in the state of Georgia, my opponent, in the face of opposition from law enforcement, eased gun laws in the state of Georgia. After a massacre just a year ago, he has taken steps to make it easier for criminals to carry weapons, for those who have domestic violence convictions to carry weapons, for those who have mental health concerns to carry weapons in the streets. His hypocrisy is what I want people to look at. And what we know is that what the Supreme Court has done is still less than what Georgia has already done. The Supreme Court did by rolling back New York's laws, made it less safe for New Yorkers, but Brian Kemp has already done that here in the state of Georgia. And my deep concern is that you cannot claim to care about the people in your state and take actions using the law to limit their protection, to undercut their safety, and to place them in harm's way. That contradiction and that hypocrisy to me is unfathomable. And we know that if you look at his record, put my rhetoric aside, put his rhetoric aside, his record does not show a concern for the life and welfare of Georgians. There are those he will speak up for, but too often in our state, the people who are the most vulnerable, who are the most fragile, or in the most need of assistance do not receive it. And whether we're talking about babies trying to get formula or women who simply want to survive, his decisions are harming them. And for communities that are afraid of gun violence, which has increased under his watch, he has made it easier, not harder, to carry those very weapons of violence that have put our communities in harm's way.
Stacey Abrams, I appreciate you coming on. You're the Democratic nominee for the governor of Georgia, and I do want to again extend a request from Governor Kemp. Come on the show. We will talk through this. Thank you so much for being here, Stacey.
Thank you for having me.
2 precedent-setting decisions erased in about 24 hours. Roe was the law of the land for nearly 50 years, and the New York gun law was on the books for more than a century. We watched as legal history was rewritten by justices who once said they wouldn't dare change long-held precedent.
It is a precedent that has now been on the books for several decades. It has been challenged. It has been reaffirmed.
Part of being a good judge is coming in and taking precedent as it stands.
As a judge, it is an important precedent of the Supreme Court. By it, I mean Roe v. Wade.
A fetus is not a person. That's the law of the land. I accept the law of the land.
We should note, before all this confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court had hit a historic low, down 11% from just 1 year ago. We have lots to talk about as I'm joined by CNN legal analyst Jennifer Rogers, former Congresswoman Abby Finnekrauer, and conservative commentator Carrie Sheffield. Ladies, thank you so much for being here. It is an incredibly emotional night for a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. I'm going to start with you, Jennifer. In Roe versus Wade, the justices said that abortion was a constitutional right. Now the justices are saying it is absolutely not a constitutional right. It is now up to the states. Is this the first time that the Supreme Court made a decision saying something was constitutional and has taken that back?
Well, it's the first time that the court has affirmatively recognized a constitutional right that it said is new or just newly discovered. So in Roe, they said there is now, for the first time, a constitutional right to abortion grounded in the right to privacy. So that was the first time that had been said. Now, 49 years later, they're saying, hey, wait a minute, when we said that, and then when we reaffirmed it again and again and again over all these years across all these different Supreme Courts, we were wrong, we didn't mean it, we're taking it back. It's the first time that that has ever happened.
When you saw what happened, Carrie, what did you think? And what do you think about this argument that this is a precedent-setting case? And you heard the justices there saying we would not mess with precedent. Precedent is precedent, and we're going to leave it as it is. But that's not what happened today.
Sure. So I rejoiced. I felt like we finally had justice for the unborn, the preborn children. And so I felt deep gratitude that this has been finally recognized after 50 years of striving and fighting for this moment. In terms of the precedent, I think what I've heard from people who work and have worked with these justices, they said that they would respect precedent, but just because you understand or respect precedent does not mean that precedent should stand. For example, in the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which established separate but equal, that was in 1896, and it was overturned with the Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, many decades later. And so certainly understanding that precedent is not, by no means ironclad, that there is a moral weight and a moral right, that the personhood of the child that is preborn should be recognized as something that is enumerated to the states. And so the word, the enumeration within the Constitution, which I have right here tonight, it is an enumerated right that the states have. Anything that is not enumerated to the federal government shall be with the states, and that is what we see here.
So let me ask you this, because the states are doing this, right? This is now up to the states. But there are Republicans trying to push forward a federal ban on abortions that are more than 15 weeks. Do you agree that a federal ban should be put in place?
Well, I think what's important to just take a step back and note that if you